God vibes only. God vibes only.
Producer.
God vibes only.
You are now tuned in to the Cosmic Convos podcast, your number one source for accurate, relevant, and thought-provoking astrological conversations in the podcast nation. The place where stars and minds align.
Peace. You are now tuned into the Cosmic Convos podcast. I'm your humble host, Harut, and I got my good brother here, Brother Ra. How you doing?
Oh, brother. Enjoying these days. I tell you, enjoying these days, taking it a day at a time. How about yourself, King?
Hey, man, like I always say, man, I'm trying to get like you, my brother. Trying to get like you, my brother.
I ain't mad at you. I ain't mad at you, man.
And he finally admits it, right? You know? Indeed, but before we get too far, I want to remind you all, make sure that you like and subscribe to this channel, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you can know when we are going live or whatnot. And remember that this episode is brought to you by Push It Forward Media Group, Calipusha Astrology, and our good people over there on Patreon. Big up to y'all. Or whatnot. You can find Push It Forward Media Group on Instagram at PUSHITFWD. From there, you can get to all the different outlets that, you know, we have things related to this podcast network and to this podcast specifically, which you can also follow at Cosmic Convo. That's COSMICCONVO on Instagram or whatnot. Brother Ra, how can the people get a hold of you?
You can hit me up via Facebook or IG at Shechem Ra, or you can get at me at Kalapurusha Astrology at Kalapurusha Astrology at gmail.com.
Indeed. So here we are. We finally made it. Episode 100 or whatnot, man. Big up to us. Or whatnot, you know. 4 seasons, you know, coming to a close here or whatnot. About to head into the next phase of the podcast or whatnot. You know, so, you know, this is a major accomplishment, you know what I mean, in regards to just, you know, the consistency and everything that's gone into it, getting it to this point to have 100 episodes under our belt is nothing to sneeze at all or whatnot. Ra, how you feel about it, brother?
We made it. You know, 100 is the magical number, as they say. You know, you get really kind of hitting the algorithms where, you know, the airwaves will catch you and people will be able to, you know, hopefully grab on and really spread the word. So I'm thankful, definitely thankful.
Indeed. You know, especially, you know, the subject matter, you know what I'm saying, that we're on. I mean, to be honest, this is really like a science podcast. You understand what I'm saying? Because you got to have, you know, a bit of a scientific mind to kind of keep up with what we're doing, what we're talking about, and everything like that. So, you know, yeah, it's interesting, man. But you know, I'm definitely glad that we powered through for sure, and definitely looking forward to what we got going on in the future or whatnot. And we're gonna talk about a little bit of that in this episode or whatnot. But before I get into that, let's talk about our last episode we had, with the brother Kanye West. What's some of the feedback you've been getting from that episode? I've been hearing, a lot of people was really enjoying that episode. And man, I had a brother in there. He didn't coin the term, but he applied it in a whole different way. And it's like, man, I didn't even think about that, man. He was Outkast. Shout out to Outkast. They're
yeah.
yeah. I think their second album was called Aquemini, right? And we have to pull their charts and see if that really applied. But one of our listeners and a good friend of mine or whatnot, he put it out there like Kanye is the real Aquemini. And looking at his chart, he is, right?
Yeah, he is. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I got some good feedback from it. People were definitely, agreeing, that this is, who he is, um, his idiosyncrasies and his kind of odd way of characterization. Odd characterization is definitely seen, via the chart. It's undeniable. You know,
Right.
it really is. It's undeniable. So, um, his makeup is just that. And that's the thing, is that we all come with our gifts and our curses. You're usually tied into one. So a
Yeah.
lot of feedback along those lines, that the brother's very talented, but also very unstable at the same time.
Indeed. Indeed. Yeah. I mean, yeah, man, we have to I don't know. I got a lot of ideas heading into the next season and stuff like that. But maybe even revisiting some of the things that we've already done in the past in some capacity or whatnot, because we definitely just honestly we really be just we I mean, even in a 2 hour long episode, we're really just scratching the surface.
That's exactly what we're doing.
Right. Indeed, indeed. But with that being said, let's let this take this into the topic of today, right? Because part of just episodes like that, and other things that we've done is part of what kind of got us to this point of whatnot. How do we sit? How do we end up being, two Black American astrologers, you know what I mean, practicing, studying Jyotish. You understand what I'm saying? Like it doesn't it's strange. You understand what I'm saying? Like, sometimes when I'm like, there's a lot of East Indians in, the Atlanta area and stuff like that, when they hear me say the word Jyotish, they look at me crazy like, you know what Jyotish is? Like, who are you? What planet did you drop from, man?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, how the heck did that happen? You know what I'm saying? Like, where do we get that from? And I think, this is give a lot of insight and just, insight into what we're trying to do with this podcast in the first place or whatnot. And I think this, this kind of episode of Complete here, episode 100, I think is good for us to kind of get into that or whatnot. What's your thoughts, Rob?
Yeah, I feel you. Definitely unusual, right?
Right.
Just a little anecdotal kind of piece. I was having dinner with my significant other, and we were sitting down, up at the kind of pho. It's like a pho bar, you get your little pho fix. And a guy next to me, pho slash sushi kind of deal. You know what I mean? Like, you get all kind of different stuff at this place. But
Right.
sitting next to a guy, and I look over, and he's he's from India, and interestingly enough, I see a yellow sapphire right on his hand, and you can tell the kind of Jyotish tools, the rings that they kind of prescribe, because it looks pretty classic. It's kind of like a gold with the the yellow sapphire, pretty nice sized stone. And I said, "Oh yeah." I said, "You got a nice little Rotna over there. You got a nice little yellow sapphire." I said, "Of course, it's for Jupiter." And he looked at me and was like, "What you know about that?" And he was a younger fella, and we just started conversing. And he ended up telling me that he was a businessman, and that his parents are the ones that are really heavy into Jyotish, and they're the ones that prescribed the ring for him. He didn't get it himself; his parents did. And
Right.
so, but he did mention, he's like, interestingly enough, my business did elevate and escalate from the time when I began to wear the ring. So he was just kind of shocked, like, how do you know this stuff? And I said, "Oh, that's my deal. That's I'm a practitioner." And he was like, "What?" Looking at me like that doesn't fit. So it's interesting because like you say, when you mention it to someone that is native to that land, they have a kind of a pause and a reassessment of how do you know about this stuff. So
Right.
I can concur with that 100%.
You know, the interesting thing though about it is that the various yogic stretching, techniques and stuff like that, has caught fire in the West, but even in how popular, quote unquote, the just the stretching portion of yoga is in the West, Vedic astrology hasn't had that same hasn't caught that same win. I mean, I even know people who claim that they're very deep in the yogic sciences and all that stuff like that, and still be Western astrologers, not even really know about Vedic astrology like that. Is interesting.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I know uh, quite a few yogis, right? Kriya yogis, and even Kriya yoga is kind of brought to the West primarily through Paramahansa Yogananda. And in
Yeah.
his book, in fact, his mentor, his guru, his actual guru, Sri Yukteswar, wrote a book called The Holy Science. And he's actually, in fact, Sri Yukteswar is one of the um, Ayanamshas that we use, right?
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough. But peace, Awani. So,
Peace.
but in his book, he talks about Jyotish. And so
Right.
you would think that these and I always do this quote, Kriya yogis, right? Because, they're culture bandits to some degree. you know, they ride the culture of everyone else and don't even understand how it is a complete science. It's a
Right.
complete holistic kind of purview, which I teach my students in the very first initial level one course in the adept level, in the neophyte level, that this is a science that's married to other sciences. It
Right.
comes out of, it's called the eyes of the Veda, but the
Mm-hmm.
Vedas have other limbs, right, that
Right.
are used. So it is interesting, like you said, that a lot of them can adopt the Kastata or the Hatha, asana aspect of it, which is the lowest rung, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then not understand that this is a fundamental part of how the culture sees reality. So it's interesting, and a lot of them do practice or still kind of attest to a Western purview of astrology. So it's kind of strange, but it hasn't caught fire, but I think is gaining more momentum, right?
Right.
In the West, definitely.
Right. And just to that point, I think the Indians themselves may have a lot to do with that, because I mean, it seems like they guard this particular aspect of the science very, very closely. I mean, like it's out there, but I don't they don't speak about the astrology as openly and freely as some of the other elements of their teachings. And I don't know if that's just because they know it's complicated, that they want to understand it, or they just really kind of just guarding it in general or whatnot. What do you think?
Yeah, they do have a reservation
Mm-hmm.
around just kind of putting it out there. I know traditionally a lot of Jyotishis have a parampara or a teacher student type of system, right? And a lot of them will ask you who's your guru, who's your teacher, to kind of to check, where you got your knowledge from. So it kind of makes sense that they wouldn't necessarily be so apropos, right, to just divulge it or kind of promote it. But strangely enough, when you look when you look into the culture, it's everywhere, right?
Oh yeah,
Um,
I mean the festivals. I mean holiday. All that
their
stuff is
their holy days, right, are structured around astrological and astronomical settings, even though some of them are off, like um, some of the festivals, they're still kind of practicing it from a time ago or old time. But yeah, it is not something that they really, you know, are rah rah about. And I understand why. I do have a respect for that reservation, but in and of itself, going to an astrologer. In fact, I think there's a book by this guy called Satguru Savaya. He talks about a lot of like how they match make. They
right,
match make. This is how they set up. Their matchmaking is not the way a lot of it's done in other traditions and other cultures. They have a
right,
astrological system that sets up their whole um, parameters. So going to an astrologer in India is almost like going to the doctor. It's something that is just commonplace and it's not unheard of. But again, we're talking about a billion plus people that primarily 70% of them practice Sanatana Dharma, or also known as Hinduism. And
mm-hmm.
in that culture, in that religious purview or in that belief system, astrology is majorly a part. You know, the samskaras that 16 samskaras that they produce that are set up, and interesting enough, the individuals that are building my website, and it is still being built, folks. It's just taking a while because it honestly is something that, yeah, it's a Shitra thing, right?
Yeah,
It's a
that ain't
Shitra
Chitra,
thing,
man.
right? Yeah, it's Shitra thing, right? But it's
Right.
just because it will be extensive. It will be a place where, for all intents and purposes, you can hang out and really get into the science of Jyotish. But um, interestingly enough, the people that are developing it are from India,
Mm-hmm.
and talking to them for hours, right? Getting things right, putting things into perspective, adjusting things. Um, they are very interested. It's interesting because a lot of them have moved away from, right, the youth anyway, have
Right.
moved away from, just like in Africa, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our youth have moved away from the more traditional outlines of what our ancestors produced. But they're like, when we talk about the 16 samskaras, one of the 16 samskaras is a naming ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
And they're talking about people still practice this stuff. Like, it's like to them, the youth, it's archaic, it's outdated, it's outmoded. And it's like, yes, people absolutely still practice it. I mean, this is part of what the Hindu, and I kind of get away from Hindu because the proper term is Sanatana Dharma, but Hinduism is the um, appropriated word that most people are accustomed to. It is a part of their practice. So picking the ideal time for when your ears are pierced, or when you give the naming ceremony, when the first lock of hair is cut. This is the fundamental part of what they do. So, um, it's embedded inside of the culture, and it's just I think a part of it is also, um, when you come to the West, it's kind of like looked upon, and they know, so they know it's kind of looked upon as like, oh, you practice, astrology, kind of side-eyed. So they don't want to be looked upon as, pseudo, or, kind of superstitious, right? So I think that's another reason why they kind of just hold back, a little, and not really promote, or kind of, um, give it the accolades that it deserves. So, I
Hmm.
understand in all aspects, why it would be, why the approach is taken that way. But, you know, like I said, it is ingrained in almost everything they do, right? With regards to their practices, it's something that is just second nature to them. So they don't even think about it, right? It's just so widely used.
Yeah, it's interesting because and maybe more so last season, I brought up is a show, Netflix show called Indian Matchmaking.
I
That's
heard, yeah,
pretty.
I remember that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a solid show. I think it might even be coming back for another season. Um, but I mean, they show it right. I mean, there's astrologers. The Indian matchmaker herself is an astrologer, and she teams up with other astrologers. You understand what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And they go
Hmm.
into it, and like, to your point of what you're just saying is that, the people that they're advising are like totally clueless of the astrology. They're Indians, but they're clueless to a lot about their culture. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
It's very
Right.
it's I don't, I think that's a mistake, right? But I think that there's a reason why that's happening because I mean you even see it on, the East Asian side, and the Chinese and the Japanese and stuff like that. Those elements of their culture that a lot of the younger people have walked away from. You
Mhm.
know, we've in some people with similar persuasions and stuff have picked it up. You understand what I'm
Sure.
saying?
Sure.
Or
Right.
whatnot, because I even, I mean, like I said, being a, civil engineer by formal training, I've, worked with a lot of Indians, had a lot of Indian professors and stuff like that. And the general sentiment, especially around the younger people, are like they look at it like spookism,
Yeah.
right? Like because their experience with it a lot of times, especially if they're like from India, is that there may be some person on the side of the street trying to what I mean, trying to hustle them for some money and trying to what I'm saying, read their
Mhm.
palm or something like that. So they don't they haven't really experienced it in a real like way. And I think that when they come here, their parents' focus is school school, what I mean, formal training school, them
Mhm.
finding a living for themselves, and they and the parents take on the responsibility of whatever spiritual underpinnings that's kind of help guide in their life. They kind of focus on that while the children focus on their school, and
Right.
getting a
Yeah.
career and stuff like that. But I think that's a huge mistake. But who am I, right?
Mhm. No, 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 you're right. That's why I mentioned that, the guy that, and he actually paid for our dinner. Like, he was so amazed, and we got into, a fairly, intricate conversation. He was amazed. He was like, "Wow, I'll pay for you. Let me take care of your bill." And I'm like, "That Jupiter stone must be working, right?"
Right, because he felt generous, right?
Very generous,
Right.
very, and he was like, "Maybe I should look more into this." Maybe he's like, a black man sitting here, a black couple, right?
Hmm.
Sitting here, talking to me about my culture, right?
Right.
And it's like, maybe he said, he's like, maybe I should look more into this. And I said, I really think you should. I think you'd be surprised of the applications it can be used for, especially for business. And he was like, okay, all right, So, definitely, they are focused on the westernization, bringing the West home, bringing the
Hmm.
best of the West, right? Like, like you said, while, mom, dad, grandpa, uncle or what have you, all kind of lean into the traditions. I'm going to go out and make this money, you know.
Right.
So, and I know he was very well to do for himself, very well to do. So, I mean, it is a loss. I would definitely say it's one of the mistakes that could be made to not instill into the children um, the culture, the need, the necessity for the carrying on of the knowledge, because and this is the thing, his parents aren't astrologers, but they have an astrologer, and most families in India have an astrologer, like they have
Right.
a family astrologer.
Right.
So it's just one of those things where times are just kind of really leaning towards the amalgamation or the mixing, the cross pollination of things, because here we are, like you said, two black men discussing something that is ancient and old and arcane, but still we still see the power of it and where it comes from. But that's, of course, what we're going to talk a little bit about today, is why we're in this, right? Why we do what we do, and some of the things that have brought us to the table. So interestingly enough, we can see that parallel, that yeah, the youth are definitely losing out on not participating and gaining. You know, hey, my children are gonna know it, right? Right.
Right.
My daughter, she's already taking, when I teach class, she's taking
You know,
notes.
it's interesting, because like my daughter, she has her little cartoons and stuff that she watch. But
Hmm.
the one of the first like kind of segments of this one cartoon that she watches called Akili and Me. They have like this one where they're like, talking about the stars and the moon and the sun and stuff like that. And that's like one of the first songs I noticed that she like kind of lit up on. You understand what I'm saying? Like
Mm-hmm.
like she really was digging that song, because it's like, yeah, it's like it incorporates counting. It's like I got one moon, what one sun, you know what I mean? And that's one of the first songs she really just pick up on. And anytime there's a song that's dealing with stars, the moon, the planets, and stuff like that, like she just gets, you know what I mean? Like she loves it, or whatnot,
Yeah.
And she walk around stars. Like that. Matter of fact, you know, yeah, she, anytime she sees stars and stuff like that, she starts singing "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star." You understand what I'm saying? Like she loves the stars and stuff like that.
Yeah, it has a nostalgia that
Yeah,
easily pulls the youth in. So we know, I mean, my daughter knows, um, my children know, for the most part, what they are, like their ascendant, their moon, and stuff like that. Of course, the older ones know a little bit, or should know a little bit more than they do, but that's just because teenage years, as you know, right, are what they are,
that's,
right?
that's the rugged ones, man. That's where
That's
you,
why you got
you
to
know.
try to push and push and push and push. But there is, interesting enough, and I was trying to find the channel of the young fella that I actually was very impressed by. And you probably have seen him. He has a younger sister, and he's out of India.
Mhm.
He started off young. I mean, but he was like going in like an
You talking about
adult.
the little boy, like they like the little child
He's not little
prodigy?
anymore. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
He's a big kid
I
now.
can't
He's
remember his name. I know you're talking
a
about,
big
but he
child,
has
rather.
the
Yes, yes, and he has the lock, the back, the
mhm.
the lock in the back. But that shows that it might not be all the way right lost in the sense that he's a young prodigy. Like
Yeah.
he is, for
But
all
I'm sure
intents.
I'm sure that the family astrologer saw that. I mean, and just put him on the
Oh
path from
yeah.
day one. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like he
oh yeah. Oh
like
yeah.
he's
And
a ancestor.
yeah, and it's the parents, you know what I mean? Because the parents are practitioners, but you can tell they have a very disciplined way of life. They follow the Sanatana Dharma probably to the T, right?
Right.
Because little girl, she's, she does the
Mm-hmm.
dancing and all, the whole bit. So,
Right.
um, and I'm trying to find, I don't even know how to, you might
and
have.
and, and, pe- and that's another thing too. Like people don't realize that like those even that dancing is there's it's not just dancing for dancing's sake.
No,
You understand what I'm
no.
saying? They're like yoga moves in themselves.
Yeah,
You know
they're
what I mean?
mudras.
There's mudras. You know, because there's one
Yeah.
for Jupiter. There's a guru. You know, guru. The Moscow. You know what I mean? Like they all they have different that's for each planet and all that stuff like that. Where you know what I mean?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. So in what it really shows is the power um, of conscience is his channel. Conscience is his
Okay.
channel. Abhigya is his name, right?
Hmm.
He's not a little guy anymore, right? He's
It's
big,
been so long since I've been on
but he's got a
the
million
Vedic
subscribe. He's got a million
astrology streets.
subscribers.
Yeah.
He's got a million subscribers. That tells you, right? I mean, he's definitely uh, a very potent young man. So and just considering the ability to have someone so young and so I mean, when he was sitting there, I'm sitting there like, wow, like what I mean. It is so it's not all the way every youth, but it does depend on like saying the parenting and the lineage that really instills and kind of sets it up. But of course, if you're in India, right, you know what I mean, you could go right to your Parampa and they got it ready for you. It's cut and sliced and diced, and you can send them over there for lessons, every week, or they come to your house and that kind of thing. So it's they're right there. Whereas where you and I, and of course those of us that are delving into it in the West, we have to seek out certain things to go access that information. So and certain people. So it's a
Right.
different ball game. But
Right.
yeah, yeah, definitely interestingly enough that young man is pretty advanced in the science. So
Indeed. Indeed. So with that being said, let's get into why how we even what I'm saying got even in proximity to this because I know just for myself I would say that I've always been interested in astrology, right? I've always been interested into non-Christian religions. From a small child, always have been, right? I could remember being, in church, and how they do like a lot of churches would do these kind of Easter plays. You understand what I'm saying? When Jesus rises, from the dead and all that whole thing. And I was remember just sitting there and just looking at the people doing it, and I was like, I don't know about this. And I was a small child, like it just clicked in my head. It wasn't like I was judging them, because I had to be no more than 5 years old, 4 really. But I remember this like just faintly, and I just was like, I don't think this is for me. like it just really just clicked in my head at that time, and I soldiered along, and we had periods of time where we were more religious than others. I mean, in regards to like frequenting church, but I know I really relished in the times we wasn't at church. And as soon as I was old enough to start doing other things, I did. Started studying Islam and stuff like that. And but I always wanted to get my way into the Hindu teachings and stuff like that. And in fact, I kind of got to that before I even got to what I practice now. You understand what I'm saying? I bought a Bhagavad Gita. You understand what I'm saying? And started digging into that in the midst of everything else I was doing, living life and stuff like that. That's what I was kind of doing off in the corner and stuff like that. But you know, as far as just specifically astrology, I always was interested, but it just, you know what I mean? Like just the way that it was presented to me, the people that was around me, the different things that I was hearing and stuff like that. It just wasn't, I didn't, I needed to bridge the gap to find how to study it properly, right? Of course I can go just pick up a book on astrology, but just to me, in my mind, I just knew that wasn't going to help me. You know what I mean? Like just going to go grab a book. I needed someone to put me in the field. Like, all right, this is what you need to be looking at, right?
Right.
And otherwise, I just wasn't. I wasn't going to go. I wasn't going to go and just buy a whole bunch of books and find it that way. I don't know. Just the way that I approach life is like, if it's for me, it's going to find me. You understand what I'm saying, or whatnot? And shoot, that's how I pretty much got to it. Of course, the Osirian thing, and stuff like that. That's specifically that like kind of put me in the right field in regards to that, you know what I mean, and started going there, but just in general, even before even what arrived got me to that point was just that disposition of like, if it's for me, it find me. You understand what
Right.
I'm saying? And it did. Or
No, I got
whatnot.
you. I got you. Yeah. Um, you know, from my person, from me, um, you know, I when I grew up, um, I always understood that whatever was being practiced, um, was, I'm not gonna say fake, but something was in it wasn't authentic. Something was missing, if you know what I
Right.
mean.
Right.
And from a very early age, I mean, very from a, I don't even want to say toddler, pre-toddler, baby. Um, I grew up in a household where my family practiced two versions of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we were in church 4 days a week.
Oh
Yeah,
man, I would have been,
yeah.
I
So
would
I
have been
grew up
struggling,
in the
man.
church. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I would have been struggling, man.
Oh man, look. So on Sundays we would get up at 6:30. We would be at church by 6:30. Really.
Mm-hmm.
So we get up at like 5. I remember it was night when we got up to go to church. So we would go to Catholic church first, right? Catholic church was about 2 hours, 2.5 hours sometimes. We would have early breakfast. They called it early breakfast. I mean, they called it early lunch, right? But it
Mm-hmm.
was breakfast, right? So, and I'm like, I'm a kid, I'm a child, young child, so I'm, not understanding, but I know when lunch is and I know when breakfast is.
You're like,
So I'm
hold
like,
up.
this isn't lunch, this is breakfast, but they call it early lunch. So
Right.
then we would go, so from Catholic church was about 2 hours, and I just remember all of the symbolism that Catholicism really held, and that was something that kind of triggered my young mind to say, you know what, there's something behind these symbols and all these kind of ceremonial type of proceedings. Then for the rest of the day, we went to Pentecostal church.
Okay.
Now, if you know anything about Pentecostal, if you think Baptist is holy, religified, sanctified. They have nothing on Pentecost. Pentecostal is really the ones that you like.
They're
Those are
known
the
for
yes,
like
those are
for
the
speaking in
revivals.
tongues and
Yeah, that's picking up snakes and drinking poison. That was the second church we went to,
hmm
right? So, and that was for the remainder of the day. We had early dinner, which was lunch, right? Um, Literally, right? Then we had a church dinner, right?
hmm
Because we left, right? So this is we're in there 2 hours, and this is where they're falling out, right? They're speaking in tongues, right? Lady was almost hit me upside my head, right? She was swung so hard, I felt the wind as she connected, right? I might have had
right.
some brain damage, right? Because she was that right. The Holy Ghost, the Spirit had her
Yeah.
that strong, right? So and that was, I mean, we went to revivals, man.
You know,
um
and it,
Crazy hours upon hours upon hours upon hours upon hours of revivals, you know just and I'm a child, all I see is people acting crazy. I mean,
right.
the preachers, oh Lord, just the whole church type of stilo where black people have been hypnotized to some degree. So, and then to add insult to injury, another part of the family was Mormon. So
Really.
we would go, yeah, and that's rare, rare. So we would go to these,
Black?
um, yeah, yeah.
That's
We would
deep.
we would go
I don't know no
to.
black Mormons.
Let me tell you, right? So we would go to these events, right, in Illinois, because I grew up back in the Midwest in Missouri and such. So we would go to these like it's not a revival, it's like these major gatherings. And I
Mm.
remember when we got the first one we went to, I looked around and it was no black people but us. I mean, I was like, because you look to see, I want to play with the children, and I'm like, there ain't nobody else but us here.
Right.
But they had a big play where they had, and this was a production they used to have every year, every probably twice a year. But I don't know. I think there's a minor one and there's a major one. We went to both.
Mm.
And so they had it to where they had like a star. It looked like a real star. I'm a child sitting there like in awe. And Joseph Smith gets the insight from Jesus, and it's a big play. Most people don't know though. Mormons actually have their founder, right, is studied pyramidology, right? So,
hmm
their kind of whole setup. They have meditation rooms. They have stuff they just don't tell you, right?
Right.
And I grew up kind of inside of that as well. So I had three Christian purviews, right, to deal with to try to program my brain to understand this whole God concept. And so that was kind of my start, and then um, my mother, we kind of moved around, and she ended up going to a New Age church, right? And the church had it was a pyramid. Now, when I say it's a pyramid, it was literally you walk into a pyramid, right? It had a crystal top, like a glass crystal pyramidion on the top,
hmm
right? And I was like, so I'm coming from Pentecostal, Catholic, and Mormon over to this, right? And it's a culture shock because I'm like, what's this? And like they had a major store, crystals and all kind of different gadgets. So I was introduced to that. And then at about 12, right? So I'm well adept in reading I mean, I know what the Bible is pretty thoroughly, right? I know all 66 books from the Catholic perspective. I know the Book of Mormon. I know pretty much all those texts. So
mm
um, a friend of mine, when I had my first Jupiter return, pulled me to the side, and he was a very intelligent, very smart young man. I mean, if he had a B on his report card, he himself would be just bitterly angry with himself. And I'm like, dude, you got a B? And I'm sitting here got B's and C's. Like, like, what's wrong with you? And so we just started hanging out real tough. And he ended up telling me one Saturday we were going to go to Temple. And I'm like, Temple, what's that? Because I'm already Christified. I'm like, what's what's this temple thing? So we go, and on the walls, on all the walls, right, there's Hebrew writing. And so it's a whole new language, a whole new concept. And they showed, um, the kind of mosaic or Moses type, journey, and the splitting of the Red Sea. And then, of course, in the middle, though, of these other like text and pictures on the wall that have the Pope. And I'm like, why is the Pope in the middle of all these texts? Like, what's that about? And he said, well, you just have to count and tell me what you see. And so I'm sitting there counting. I'm like, count what? You know what I mean? Like, I don't even know how to read Hebrew. And so he's like, no, just read the Roman numerals. And the Pope, he had a real funky look. Like, he didn't look right. The Pope was looking like a pimp. Like, he was sitting there, the hat's cocked to the side, red eyes. I'm
Oh,
like,
okay.
what's up? So he's like, just count the Roman numerals, bro. So I counted them, and I said, oh, yeah, they do add up. He said, what do they add up to? I said, yeah, it's 666. He said, you know about that, right? I said, of course I know. He's like, so I said, what you saying? He's like, that's the devil. And I'm like, what? That flipped my wig, because I go to raised in a Catholic church, and a Pentecostal
Right.
/ Mormon. So I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, man, the church of today is the Antichrist. And I'm like, blown away. And so I start going. Like, it was interesting because I've always been interested in, religions and the concept of God and that type of thing. Just from a small child, I've always found it to be something of um, that really just made me want to know more. And so I really started studying with them. And
Right.
my mom even started going, she was like, what are you into? You reading Hebrew? And I'm like, yeah, mom, like, this is heavy. And so ended up going there for quite some time when we were there. It was called the Institute of Divine Metaphysical Research. Interesting, right?
Right.
And so I learned how to decode. I had to get up and read Hebrew and the English translation and break it both down. So I'm standing up in front of, the congregation, and the youth had to do this. It was not like, you could go and play and go to the back room with the other children. No, you had to be there, and everybody had to read and give their kind of rendition of what was being said. So me being already familiar with the text of the Bible, I was already interested, because I was saying, hey, this makes more sense because it's at least the original language. I knew that. I'm like, this is, and of course, it was Sabbath, no eating of the swine, upholding the whole 613 commandments. And then as a teenager, right, got into my teen thing, right. And then as soon as my Jupiter Dasha hit, I went right back, rolled Rahu out, right. And that Rahu, that was my whole childhood. So you can understand how, you know, that mysticism, right, of
Right.
the church was there. I see these kind of various branches and why. But when I got to my Jupiter Dasha, I went back and I actually became a priest of a Hebrew priest of the Institute of Divine Metaphysical Research. And so that kind of was my journey into spirituality. And then from there, of course, I had some books on astrology, and something about astrology always drew me because it was just interesting. It was just like, why would they say this? And then I did have the sense that something was amiss there too. So I didn't go as deep, right, as I probably could have. I had 3 or 4 books, read a few things here and there, knew all the signs, planets, and all that, but didn't understand the inner workings and the mechanics of it, and until, of course, right, entering into Asara Set in 1998. I mean, 1998, 99. And that was the spark that, you know, that lit the flame that, we have today. And so um, I sat down with, I met with, a very, very potent clanny, right? If those of you that know what a clanny is, right? He was my clan. And Shim Hum Hum was, really the person that that would inspired me. In fact, interesting enough, he came and had a fella had a reading here, a guy that I knew named Michael. And when the reading took, I remember the reading, and he told Michael everything. When he told him the date that he got married, I got goosebumps. That's when I knew. I said, "No, I got to know this. I don't know how you would know that, right? But
Right.
how?" And and so I mean, and even Mike was tripping. He was like, "Man, what in the heck is this? What is that?" I'm like, "I'm gonna find out." Right. I mean, I already kind of knew, right?
Right.
I already knew, but I didn't know. I had gotten wind of it, and so um, uh, I met Shim Dahum briefly at one of my first retreat, and then I got wind of some tapes that he did, and
Hmm.
then I got tape of Shechem doing it. You know, and when I got that, that's when the rest is history, right? I really started delving into it deeply, and I mean, taking notes. This is pre-internet, right? This is not. We don't have
Right.
the internet up and running as it is today. We had minimal, very minimal interaction with it. You would maybe look up a few things, but not the prodigious knowledge that it produces now. So yeah, I took notes, took notes, took notes, took notes, took notes, took notes, asked questions, and that kind of just really, lit the fire and fanned the flame, and then it just took off from there.
Indeed. Yeah. And these are things. Some of these kind of revelations for me is just kind of. I mean, they're revelations, things that I'm just learning, just kind of how how I just function. You understand what I'm saying? Like even back in when I was a child, the thing that made me not want to like really pursue Christianity is because no one understood it. No one if I asked the question,
No one
no
had the
one could
answer.
give me
Yeah,
no one would have give me any answer, right? And
yeah.
it was a similar thing with astrology. Like the simple questions that I would ask, they didn't have that answer. Like because it just I don't know. It's like I don't know. You call it intuition or whatnot, but I can tell when what's being presented to me. I can tell that it is there's an error in it. You understand what I'm saying? Just inherently, like just as simple as the charts in tropical don't match what's in the sky. To me, that was a deal breaker. Just that was a deal breaker. Like if it just didn't make sense. You know what I mean? It didn't make any sense to me of why why is that why does it not match, and why are y'all looking at this? It just doesn't make. So then it's like you know until I came across someone that I obviously can tell they knew what they were talking about. You understand what I'm saying? And appeal just the simple things, and they didn't take like a whole take me over the woods, through the woods and over the hills and
Mm.
all. Just the simple kind of common sense things that's just like, yeah, well, this reflects what's actually in the sky. Okay, that makes
Mhm.
sense to me. If you start me there, that's enough to make me go and start digging.
Mhm.
Just
Mhm.
what I mean. But if you at the onset, if it doesn't make sense from the onset, I'm not gonna waste my time looking at it.
No, no, I get it.
you,
I
you,
got it.
you
That
know?
makes sense. Yeah, yeah. And you know, I when I first really started sitting at the feet of a Jyotish practitioner and guru. The individual that I sat at the feet of he um, lived in India for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he would always tell me, you know, the reason the West doesn't have it is because it's not meant for them to have. And I'll be like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, you know, there's power in this. And I was like, that's when I understood why they're not on the mountaintop, you know,
Right.
swinging and saying, "Hey, come look this," because um, there's so much potential power in it. It's not it's not designed to just fall in your lap. You have to seek it. You have to go
Right.
for it. You have to find the truth. And
In my
Sudarshan,
case, it found me.
right? See,
It sought me out.
right? Did not feel, and that's part of your destiny, right? We know your planetary placement. So, you know, but when I was sitting at his feet, um, I'm taking notes, right? He's going through all of the points, going through Vargas, going through aspects, going through just everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was amazing how much knowledge he had in his brain. I mean, this guy
I
didn't
know that feeling. I know what you're saying.
like, how do you know all of this? Like, what is it? Do you have like something in your eyelid? You know what I mean? Like, what is the power that gives you this ability? And
Right.
so, um, when I really, Shimda Hum Hum and that kind of experience was the first thing that really sparked and really made me go and say, I'm going to learn this. But what really made me understand what had to happen in order for me to take it on. We were at a place called Govinda's, and he lived in the Hare Krishna community at the time. They had a little small enclave of Hare Krishnas. Um,
Man, that's a popular restaurant name. I know there's a Govinda here in Atlanta. There's one in
it
Philadelphia,
might
and you're
be well.
mentioning,
I
but they
think
say
what it
they're
is
not related. They said they're not.
they may not be, but
These
I
are
think they're still part of the Hare Krishna. You know what I mean? Type of
right.
movement. So whatever, because Govinda is is directly connected to Krishna. So
Is this a
um,
vegan restaurant? The one that you're
yeah,
talking about is a
it's
vegan?
yeah,
Yeah. See, yeah,
yeah.
they're all vegan, but they're then
They're all vegan.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just like the church. Just like
Right.
the mosque. It's an extension of what they practice because they have a very strict vegetarian diet, not
Right.
vegan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Vegetarian, right? And so one day he invited me for lunch, and he knew what he was doing, right? He was very intelligent fella, right? Very intelligent. I mean, mind blowing. So we were sitting there, and a guy came in, and I know he's side eyeing. I can, you can feel when your teacher's side eyeing you, like, okay, pay attention, right? And so the guy comes in, and he's talking to him, and he says, "Oh yeah, so tell me your date of birth." And he tells him, he's like, "Yeah, what time are you born?" So he just starts doing his chart in it, like right there, like no piece of paper, no writing, no nothing. He knew where every planet was. I'm talking about every planet: Moon, Sun, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, the nodes, everything in his head.
Right. That's a hell of a processor right there.
And I'm sitting there because I'm using ephemerises, like they're big
Right.
huge books that I say that folks, this I did this, I've been doing this so long, right? I didn't have a computer when I started, right? I had an ephemeris, right? To draw the charts out, do the mathematics, right? So, I've been doing it that
That's how I
long. Right.
started.
Exactly. An ephemeris. And his mind was just about that thick too, right? You have to go through that joker and line them up. And the ephemeris doesn't give you like the exact pinpointing. You have to know how time moves inside
Right.
of those dates and those points. So, that's how I really learned astrology, is using something by hand. I didn't have uh I didn't have um Parshara, right?
Right.
That was non I think Parshara wasn't even existing then, right? If I'm correct, right? I think
The
Goravani,
the software, right? Yeah, the
yeah, the
Parshas Light.
software, yeah, Parshara's light
It might
wasn't
have been
even
out
exist.
there,
No,
but
no,
I didn't know
it
about
wasn't here. It wasn't
it.
here,
Okay.
right? It was still in India, right? I think Goravani was here. Goravani was here. Goravani
Okay.
is was the first introduction to a software I had, and but he knew every single planet, and not only did he know every single planet, he could tell him exactly when things were happening, how they happened, who was the person that, I mean, it was because I had never seen him do a council before.
Mm-hmm.
I did after that, but that was my first time. My
Right.
jaw hit the ground. Now I thought Chim the Hoom was hot stuff, right? And he was, right? He was dope, powerful, but he had a program.
Mm-hmm.
Sudarshan had no program. He was the program.
Right.
So that's when I begin to understand. And when he told me the power of it, he's like, "You don't understand the power of this." And I mean, I almost wanted to fall to my knees, not to him, but just to the Supreme, to say thank you. Like, this is something that I was in my heart's desire has been fulfilled, because this is the knowledge that I've been seeking all along.
It's
And
like the
so,
Matrix.
yeah,
It's like the Matrix. You understand what I mean? Like those. That's what really clicked to me and made me pursue it. It's like this is like the Matrix. It's like, because it's one thing to know that everything is planned and there's a, but to actually have it, like
mhm,
to see the plan. You understand what I'm saying?
yeah,
To
yeah.
have, you know.
That's why I tell them. I said, when you see what I see, you'll
Hmm.
understand it, because then it will give you it will you people people will say, and I love playing, I enjoy, my person enjoys kind of playing with the human mind, because people sometimes don't get what they say. They don't understand their language. We do as priests and initiates, but people, the common man, doesn't. And they
Hmm.
always ask the cliche-ish question, "Oh, don't you believe in God?" And I'm like, "No." And like, no. I'm like, they're like, "No, you don't believe in God?" I'm like, "Mhm, no." "Why don't you believe in God, brother?" You know, I have to tell them, like, there's no need.
Yeah.
And they're like, "What do you mean there's no need?" I know there's a supreme being.
Right.
I get. No, I'm like, "No, you
No, you
don't
don't. You don't.
understand."
You don't.
Like, your mind doesn't comprehend when I see someone and they have a destiny that's unfolding, and those things are going to happen. There's not a second guess, it's not a if or a probability. It's going to happen. And when you see, as they say, the writing on the wall, right? It's like, there's just another feeling and connection that you have with the supreme being, and it humbles you. It makes you want to live your destiny to the best of your ability. It makes you want to use this time that you have been given to the best that you could use it. You know what I mean? There's no wasting. There's no way you can throw away what you've been given. And that is what I try to instill in my students, to let them know that, there's a spark that happens when you are into this knowledge. There's a click, there's a switch that's flipped. And when the switch is flipped, it's like the light, like you said, it's like that pill. You took the pill, right?
Right.
Now the pill has hit you. You're feeling the effects. You're seeing the power of it, and you're in awe. You're amazed, and it then makes you want to learn and know even more. So when I sat at the feet of Sudarshan, and I studied with him for about a good 3 years before he moved, and he told me, he said, "You know why I left India?" He had me rolling one day. I said, "No," he said, "because I want to get chicks." I was like, I'm like, what? He said, I was in a monastery for 20 years.
Okay.
I'm like, I'm
Yikes.
like, oh. He was like, I hadn't even looked at a woman. He said, I'm just now trying to get a girlfriend. I mean, I busted out laughing because it was the way he said it. He was just like, and he was serious, but you
Yeah.
know what I mean? He was like, you don't understand, right? The level of discipline that it takes not to even look at a woman. I'm like, what? He's like, that's how I could put it in here like this. He said, because that's all I did every day. There was no days off. Every day was a holy day. I'm like,
Right.
wow. He's like, there was no separation between me and the supreme being. I was there with my guru. And he's like, and you think I'm something. My guru is 10 times what I am.
Right.
I mean, he told me stories about how the guru literally touched people, and the people literally they had illnesses, they went to the doctor, they come back, they're sitting at the guru's feet kissing his feet because of the power that he has access to. And so of course, he's like, my guru is a walking, living, high ordered being that is a computer on high. He's like, you think I got it? He's like, that person knew everything. Like there was nothing that he did not know. And I'm like,
Mm.
that's amazing. So, it of course it's a trickle down process, but
Right.
sitting at the feet of that person, that man for, you know, 3 years, writing things out. My hand would be tired, bro. My hand would be cramped. And then have to go home and do my assignments and come back and then reiterate what I learned, demonstrate. It was like it was a learning process I had, and most people don't know this. Most people think I learned it by books. I didn't, right? I actually had someone that showed me the nuts and the bolts and how to understand it from a fundamental perspective. Um,
I don't
and
think you
so
can learn it 100% like that. I don't
there's
think you
no way
can.
to learn it from books. You can't, right? You can learn a lot, but you can't learn how it works. Like what things activate and turn off and push and pull and prod and reveal these kind of inner secrets. You have to have someone that has walked that path in some way.
Hmm.
And then he left. He got himself a girlfriend, right?
Shout out to him.
Yeah, he got himself a girlfriend. Pretty lady, pretty Indian lady, beautiful.
Hmm.
Um, and I know when I saw her when she first started coming, it was like my second. It was like my end of my. No, it was the end of my second year. Yeah, when she started coming, now this is the thing. It wasn't like he wasn't whorish or anything like that. He's very discreet, very respectful, very. I'm sure they're married by now. In fact, I know they're married. They got married.
Mm.
Because he's like, I want to become a householder. He's like, I'm tired of being a sannyasin. I got it. I got it. I'm like, I get it. Right. Most people don't know this about me. I sat at the feet of a person that had prodigious amounts of knowledge and experience in this field. But when he left, he told me, he's like, he said, you are going to continue to excel in this. And at some point, you will be able to do what I do based on my chart. Because he's like, I
Mm.
wouldn't teach you. He told me I wouldn't teach you if it wasn't in your destiny. I was like, wow. He's like, look, when I leave, I hope you hit the ground running. That's what he said, literally, his words. I hope you hit the ground running. And so I did. I did get a couple of more um, teachers out of India, a guy named Sunit. Shout out to Sunit, right? Because we've talked actually not too long ago. I showed him about the show, and he watches the show every blue moon because he's pretty busy. He's in India, and
Hmm.
Sunit taught me a lot about Jiminy. Because I was trained in Parashara
Hmm.
exclusively. I had no Jiminy. I had some Jiminy knowledge, but very, very little. And he was really, he's an adept astrologer in India, and he's the one that really took me under his wing and showed me a vast knowledge about Jiminy. And learned so much from him. And his parampar, his teacher, and I talked quite a few times, and he was amazed because he was like us, like, "What are you doing? What are you doing studying this young man?" And I'm like, he's like, "How do you know this?" And I told him about Sudarshan. I told him about Shimna Hum, Shechem Shechem, and those types and he was just amazed. He said, the knowledge is really reaching the West. And it's falling into the hands of those that have a love for it, because those of us that love it are the ones that are going to be the ones that really take it seriously. There are people
Right.
that dabble, the people that
Hmm.
stick their toe in, and it's sometimes overwhelming, right? It is over it This is a science, like you said, brother. It is a science. It is not something you just do, right? It is a really um and I was always told, if someone tells you that they've mastered it, walk away. That's what Sunan used to say. He said, if someone told you you've mastered, walk away. Because you cannot, you cannot. Kan Rao, he Sunan knew Kan Rao. Kan Rao is a
Hmm.
very advanced Jyotish instructor. Kan
Right.
Rao, BV Raman, his teacher, and those individuals were very, very familiar with one another. Um, and he told me, he's like, you can't learn all of this in one life. You just can't. It's just too vast.
Right.
You know, there's always some technique, some new application that people unveil or find from the old, scriptures, old scrolls, or something that someone might even come up with that they apply or they use. The combination of different systems, KP. They didn't like KP, right?
Hmm.
They
That's
didn't.
where I started.
Yeah, I started with KP too, right?
Right.
Until I met Sudarshan, and
Hmm.
there's a split. There's a big kind of rivalry in India with KP, because they call it redundancy, and I'm like, what do you
Hmm.
mean? Like, it's redundancy. And then of course they don't really dig the Placidius application.
Right.
They're equal house users. And
Hmm.
I understand. I know why, right? I mean, we really got into real, because when I came from Asar said, I was KP down, like KP, 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 and he's like, we don't need KP, and like, like what? Like, you don't need KP, and it's like KP is, and they have respect for Krishnamurti Padhari, because they understand that it is a very powerful predictive science,
Right.
but their application, they don't need it. I mean, their ability to do it without it is phenomenal.
Right.
They understand Bavalit charts very well. They understand Placidius very well, but their usage of it is very different, especially from Jiminy's point of view, right? Jiminy is very, and there are some Jiminy that use Placidius. You have so many mixtures of this. It's amazing, right?
To me, it seems like just even that using the Placidius is like almost overthinking it. You understand what
That's
I'm
that's
saying?
what they're saying. This is like
Right.
redundant, and
Hmm.
I get it, because um my teacher used to say, what if they don't give you the name? Because there's a system that we use to find out within the 100 to 1 240 1 to 249, um there's a number that we find based on the name of the person and things like that. So
Hmm.
what if they don't give you, you get the head rolling? What if you don't give the name? And I'm like, I'm like,
Yeah.
what do you mean? And it's like, if they don't give you the name, but you have the date, time, and places that change. And I'm like, no. I said, so what if they don't give you the name? Are you now unable to predict? And I'm like, no. So then I understood where they were coming from. But there's some of them that do combine KP. Some of them use all three. They'll use KP, they use Parshar, and they use Jiminy. It just depends on who you're dealing with and what school of thought they come from. So none of them, they haven't just thrown the baby out with the bathwater, but a lot of them want you to just really stick to the traditional way of doing it because KP is new, right?
Right.
KP is, it's not an ancient system. In fact, I use KP's Ayanamsha, and we and Sunan and I, right, would understand. He would always tell me, no, Lahiri, Lahiri, Lahiri. And one time I showed him, right? I showed him how KP's the Ayanamsha was right, and he agreed.
Hmm.
And this is someone that is far advanced in Parshar, and we could hang. We were good, but Jiminy, I have to always give up respect to the people that taught me what I know. But he was far more advanced in Jiminy than I was.
Right.
But when he used that KP, and he still uses it today, right? The
Mm.
Ayanamsha is better, right? It's 6 minutes difference. That 6 minutes knocks everything just perfectly on. So whatever KP did in his science and his estimation of the usage of that Ayanamsha is right on the money. But some
Mm.
people use another whole nother Ayanamsha, right? So, that's why you have these different Ayanamshas because they're just different schools of thought. They're
Hmm.
different ways of seeing the same science. And that's why a lot of Western astrologers will try to kind of, you know, ridicule and poke fun and try to poke holes. Well, which is it? You know, um, and I just
We,
tell
we
them
we
it
we
doesn't
got in a
matter.
discussion like that one time
Oh yeah,
on Clubhouse.
right. And I can tell them, and I'll tell them it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
Any of them I use is within a degree difference. The maximum difference is a degree, 29 degrees to 0 degrees.
Hmm.
That is 1 degree. We're talking a whole 24 degrees over here, my friend. Right?
Right.
That's not even conceivable in application. So when we start talking 24 degrees versus you can't even use Vargas in the
Yeah.
West in reality
Hmm.
because it's 24 degrees off. It's off. Every Varga you use is a stuck fixed system. I mean, it's fallible. You know what I mean? So, and we're next season we really gonna try to get one of the I would say, and I have a lot of respect for Ra'aku, right?
Hmm.
Try to get him on and really have an intelligent conversation with him. But
Yeah.
he respects the science, he does.
It's sometimes, you know, see me, I've never been married to a knowledge per se. You understand what I'm saying? Until it just totally presents itself. So some people, you marry it and it's there, and you can't. You've almost gone too far. You can't you can't
Right,
walk away at this point. You can't
right.
divorce.
'Cause,
You know what I'm saying?
your
You're
brain
gonna.
gets so gelled in it.
Uh huh.
It's like trying to, it's like almost letting go of that thing. It's almost like a belief system in effect. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's a religion to a point, and it's a religion with mixed with some science because if you're not using something that is concisely measurable. And people say, well, how can you measure this and do that? And I know there's a lot of different conjectures about the differences in the sizes of the signs and do you use Ophiuchus and all that kind of stuff, right? There's a lot of different opinions, but I can guarantee you this, right? If I used what the Western uh, what the Western perception is of astrology in a real live scenario to navigate the world, around me. I'm talking about physically when I'm lost, if I'm at sea, if I'm in another country, I would never find my way to back to the point of where I need to be in reality because it's just that off. Cannot
Right.
use directions and apply them scientifically. And here's the craziest part about it all. You even have some people in India that are now using Western. Not very many, it's very, very few. I'm talking about maybe 5%, if that, maybe 2% of the Jyotish that, but you do have some.
I
And
mean, you
so
will. You always. It's always one. It's
that it
always.
happens, right? It happens. But
Yeah.
you know, they still have to rely on a lot of old techniques to do what they do. And the Varga charts just a lot of times a lot of stuff doesn't work. And I talked to Sunit and we were talking about it, and he was saying how it's the same way that you have, um, and he knows about a lot of these guys, Ernst Wilhelm, um, what's the Victor Cara. He knows about them. And he just laughs. He's like,
I think it's
I.
ego, man. They want to
He
be.
says it's
They
racial.
want to.
It's racial. He called it racial profile.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
said it's racial. He said it's really subconsciously racial. And I'm like,
Hmm.
I mean, I know it to be true, but I'm like, really, you think? I mean, in your heart of hearts, you think it? That's the. He said, yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Uh, uh,
yeah.
yeah. I didn't want to say it, but yeah, that's where I look at too. It's like you want to be. It's like a colonizer mentality. You understand what I'm saying? Like,
That's
you know what
exactly what it is.
I'm. It is. It's
We have
whether
the
they realize
knowledge.
it or not.
Yeah, it's subconscious.
Right.
He's saying it's like it's not even known and it's not realized, and you're leaning into something that is, you know, a fallacy. You know,
Right.
on a night sky, there's stars that have points. They're points of light, and you see there's a background movement in the stars that doesn't change. That is not applicable to being wrong. That is just standard observation. And if you
Right.
can't see what that is, that means that there's a subconscious something playing out that is skewed or misappropriated the reality in what you're seeing. That is something and I'm like, you're right. Because he's like, when we go out and we observe, we look out, we actually look to see, hey, where is this? And we
Right.
go back to the system, match it, you know what I mean? And it's fun to us, you know what I mean? It's like you know, our little kind of adventure to say, okay, yeah, I know where this is, I know where that is, I know there's 4 planets here, da 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 da, right? But if you can't do that and really look and make the same correlation, something's mentally wrong. And I'm like,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, you're right. And he's like, that's a subconscious. And he's, a lot of there's a kind of I don't want to say a battle, but there's a separation in India. Many say that the Aryan invasion is real. A lot of people from India say yes, it's real.
Hmm.
The ones that are trying to fit in more in the West and kind of bridge over here will say that that's not a complete assessment of what happened, and it was more an amalgamation than a war. But soon it is of the school and his teacher, right, and teachers and his whole school. They know there was a definite, right.
I,
Uh,
I, 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 yeah. I mean,
you know
I
what I
got
mean?
some spiritual experiences, and I ain't even gonna get into it like that on like that on
Yeah.
here. But yeah, it was definitely probably a better term, genocide.
All
You
For
know.
all intents and purposes, yes,
You know.
yes. So it's just, India is a billion people,
Right.
right? Um, Not everybody practices Sanatana Dharma. Some people practice Jainism and still use astrology.
Right.
Some people practice, and even within the Sanatana Dharma, you have different schools of thought. You have the Shivites, you have the Vaishnavites, you have the Shaktis, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
ones that practice even within that context different applications. So, just like with astrology, you have different schools of thought. So, it's not just amalgamous or just one type of thing that happens. There's just various ways that it's done. But in comparison to what the West produces and the limitations, and some of the techniques of the West is correct. Like when we look at astrology, from what we know and how it's applied, it's some of that is Western. More, in India, it's more predictive. It
Right.
really is more predictive. It's really more what's going to happen, who should you marry, what time should you invest, what time should you build your house, which direction do you build. It's more applicable in its approach versus psychological. You know what I
Right.
mean? The West is more psychological, even though it's very much, in depth, ingrained. It's ingrained in them to know how to do that, but it's not the way they teach it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You have to sit underneath a teacher to get that. It's not like you know what I mean? That's more of a Western approach, the psychological aspect of it. My teacher, Sudarshan, only taught me that during the second year. He
Mm.
didn't teach me any psychological, nothing. It was all for predictive purposes to know when these things will trigger, what this house does when these things enter there. It was not psychological. My third year, of course, it was an inundation, but it was a mixture of the two and showing how they relate to one another. But, for the most part, he would tell me, you know, I don't want you to begin to judge people by what I tell you. It's just what I'm telling you is proper and exact to be able to predict properly. And
Right.
so, I mean, that's their approach. Is it's not readily given to you until you are ready to get that knowledge. So in the West, it's really psychological, mental, how are you? How do you act? Why do you do what you do? Not when are you going to do what you do, right? Not where are you going to do what you're going to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not, the outcome of what you're going to do, right? Is really, just primarily trying to get into the inner thinking and mentality of a person. So,
Right.
but they're merging, right? And so they've taken on a lot. And like I said, the West does have a lot of techniques, astronomically speaking, like out of bounds. That's a technique that I still use, especially in mundane astrology, to see, when things will happen. So there are some techniques that definitely they have brought to the table. I don't want to just throw it completely under the bus, but for all intents and purposes, if it didn't exist, right, the power of Jyotish would still stand as it is, as a profound science of a predictive ability.
Indeed. Indeed. And folks, I mean, one thing, like if you got, and this is when you that video where you were having that discussion with Nature Boy, and he's
Oh
over there
wow,
talking
yeah.
about he talking about the apps, and I'm like, man, what are you talking about? If you do the apps, it would the apps don't match. They don't match what you're talking about. But I mean,
No.
nowadays it's so good. You got these astronomical apps like Night Sky and stuff like that right on your phone where you could just point to it and see it, for yourself. And they're not astrology apps; they're astronomy apps. You know what I mean?
Astronomy app, right.
Right. You know, um, I was I'll show somebody that the other day because people start talking astrology. Oh, you a this because I just had an Earth Day that just came through or whatnot. And they was like, oh, you're a Scorpio, and I'm like, well, no, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, I would just put up the app and point it, like the sun happened to be like kind of setting right there. And I was like, all right, you see the sun right there? All right, I'm showing, all right, you see this app, right? You see it's like right in line with the sun. What do you see? What is right there?
Hmm.
And it was like,
Hmm.
oh, snaps. And then I started going around and started looking. I was like, oh, I didn't even know you can do that. I'm like, yeah, you can do that.
Hmm. Right.
you
So,
know?
like you said, if you're using the app, it's not going to say what you said, right? It's going to say
Exactly.
something different. because it's a science that we use based on what is observable in the night sky. You know what I
Right.
mean? So, that's why when you really get into it, it's very interesting how, and this is another psychological, like you said, you're so married and so attached that what you see is not what you're saying.
Right.
You know what I mean? You know what you're saying is not there. And it's like it's amazing how the mind can still produce a belief system despite having emphatic evidence of what is being, you
What
know,
they call it, cognitive dissonance.
cognitive dissonance at its best. I mean, how deep does a rabbit hole go? Right? Because it's
Right.
like, Ra Aku and I have had some very long-winded, conversations. Like, when his young student came on and had that little, brief encounter.
Right.
Again, you're being passed on a belief, right?
Hmm.
And you can't take me outside and show me this. You can't. There's no way you could. What you're going to show me is going to always verify what the ancestors and the ancient ones have said for time immemorial. And
Right.
so, it's like, do you think that they built a pyramid or Merkut to point at a star when the star wasn't really there? Like, no, that's a reason why it's there, because there's a relationship between the two, right?
Right.
So, your ancestors did it this way. And when you go back and study history, you'll see it, it's there. The divergence is there, right? You'll see
Hmm.
it, it's there. It's historically verifiable. It's not something that's like a mystery, like how, it's there, but
Right.
you know, um, hey, if
You
you,
can't. You can't. I mean, that's the clear thing that I was when we were having that conversation is that it's a difference between like looking at it from here and just looking at it like from just what I mean, because that was my whole perspective. I'm like, look, all right, you talking about all these different, all right, that's cool, but deal with this one thing. When you go out in the sky and you look, and if we develop astrology that way, if we observe the sky and develop the science that way,
Mhm.
what are we talking about?
Yeah, it's astrology is sacred astronomy. That's what it is.
Right.
We took the word astrology and threw it away and said
Hmm.
sacred astronomy. You couldn't have Western astrology,
Right.
right? It's sacred astronomy. It's astronomy that's applied to, for all intents and purposes. And they say, well, it wasn't practiced that way in the past. Not for the common man, no. The
Right.
common man didn't have a need for it.
The common man didn't read.
Thank you, right? People say, well, in Kemet, everybody was literate. No, that's
No.
a fallacy. The priest and the priests knew how to read it,
Right.
but only the scribes could write it.
Right.
So you see what I mean? Like, no, that's completely wrong. But yeah, the king, the Nasut, the what do you call it, the pharaoh, the person that was the head honcho, and those priests that were running society, because it was a theocracy. Kemet was a theocratic society where
Hmm.
the priest class ran the system, right? They're the ones that actually would use it to, of course, inculcate a priest to see if that person was viable, to use it to see if crops were going to fail, to see if there was going to be wars, to see if the king would deal with some type of sickness, illness, or attack, whatever, right? Those higher ups would have access. So yeah, it wasn't technically used as it would be today for the common person, but it was used for the nation and for the betterment of the higher ups, to so that they can navigate and make the proper decisions at the right time. So it's yes and no,
Right.
because you didn't have the average person didn't need a horoscope. They're concerned about getting food, about planting their crops, about you know um, having a healthy baby.
Right.
They're not concerned about what the stars are for foreboding. So you know
They don't need to know how the sausage is made.
right. You know what I mean? They're trying to, make wheat into bread. You know what I
Right.
mean? you know, that kind of science, like practical
Yeah.
applications of things. So, yeah,
And that's still true to a degree today.
It is. It really is.
It'll always be the majority of the population won't. It's just it. That's just how it's designed. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? People don't like hierarchy, but it exists on every
Kingdom.
almost in every kingdom on the planet. It exists. There's always going to be people who have ability, that have knowledge, that have status. That is, you're always going to have hierarchy.
Let me ask you this.
Period.
What do you think about this? What do you think about there's astrologers, I won't say any names, right? That say that anybody could learn this. What do you think about that?
No, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I think anybody can appreciate it, can have a general understanding of it, but I don't believe that. My experience has not proved that that's true. I mean, yeah, I don't believe that at all.
I don't either. I'm
And it's and I don't think it's because they inherently can't. They won't. I mean, like there are things. I mean, like you could look at it and say, well, yeah, all right, I don't see that you have these abilities, but how it actually plays out in actual life, they won't. They won't do it. You understand what I'm saying? They
yeah,
won't. And then there is a other piece of it, of just almost the part of the science that doesn't come from the class, that doesn't come from the books, that doesn't come from looking at charts. It's just the part that like comes to you
intuition.
while you're walking down the street.
Yeah,
You
intuition.
understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Those type of things. That's the component. Those two things is what I see is what keeps everyone from being able to know it.
If we are applying the science at a rudimentary level, and we are accepting that destiny at a
Right.
rudimentary level is 100% real, then how could we make such a blanket statement to say that everybody, or if I could teach it to anybody? Because if that's the case, then anybody can do
Anything.
anything.
And we know that's not true. I mean, everybody can't be an engineer. I mean, like, just something like, I mean, I know people who math, just let's use math as an example.
Hmm.
I don't care how many tutors, how many, it just don't click. It won't.
But
It just won't click.
the thing
I'm
is
sitting
that
here.
when you look at the way the human brain is structured, there are, and we talked about that before. We've talked about this in the podcasts before, that
Right.
there are intelligent, um, there are intelligences, right? See, intellect is one thing, right? But there are different forms of intelligences that give you and I and everyone else the abilities to do what we do. There is a kinesthetic ability to do certain things. That's like saying, Mike, I could be Iron Mike Tyson if I want to be. No, not going to happen. Mike has experienced a set of experiences with his Gemini rising, moon in Scorpio in the sixth, right? Right.
Hmm.
Right. His set of experiences, his physiology, right, gives him the ability. That's like saying I could be 6'3" if I want to be, right? No,
Right.
I'm 5'8". That's what I'm gonna. That's my setup. You know what I mean? It just doesn't. It's not going to change, and that's when I try to get people to understand that if someone tells you that, like if someone tells you like they mastered it, walk away. Same thing. If someone tells you they could teach it to you, you just have to sit down and learn it. Let that person just do what they do, and let them follow that path and train of thought, because that is not the way that the Supreme has designed creation, especially man as a species. We are not an amalgamous type of entity where we can just do any and everything that the same other people. There are leanings, inclinations. In fact, the word desire, desidare, means of the stars.
Right.
So some
You
people
know,
have the desire to be basketball players, and that's what the heavens have articulated and put into that individual. It's like when we compare LeBron and Michael Jordan. There's no comparison. They are
right.
both basketball players, but Michael Jordan was for his era, his
Mm,
time, his level and ability, and there's only one Michael Jordan. There's only one LeBron James. There's only one
right.
Michael Jackson. There's only one, you see what I mean? Like that's when we have to understand and respect individuality and come to an understanding that no, not everybody can do everything, you know.
Right. You don't have time. You won't have time to do it. I mean, I guess technically, if you really was, embraced advanced spiritual techniques and did all these different, but you won't do it. You will
No,
not do it. You won't do it.
no.
I mean, you just won't. You won't have time to do it. You'll be wasting time trying to do something like that that's not really in the cards for you that way.
That's right. And when
You
those
know what I'm
dashes
saying?
change, those dashes change, right? Those chapters of life shift your spiritual um, makeup into another paradigm of thought and reality in this planet.
Right.
You will stop. You will cease. You will say, what am I doing? Why am I trying to learn this stuff? I need to be making money. I need to
Right.
be, building a temple, or I need to be whatever it is that you need to think you need to do, right? You're gonna do that because that is what the design of your makeup is constructed you do. And here's the thing: if you try to continue to do it, and like you said, that time is wasted, that's one of the things that weighs heavy on your heart.
Mm,
Like, man, I really did want to do this, but I just did it just to prove a point. What point are
yeah.
you proving? You know what I
Right.
mean? So
Right.
it's just interesting. I wanted to run that by you and run it by the people to see, because there are people, and I won't say any names, right? And that's a Western person that's saying this, right? Mind you, that they
Hmm.
can just teach it to anybody. And as long as you have the aptitude to sit down and do it, you can do it. No, right? I very much disagree with that perspective.
Indeed. Indeed. Well, I mean, man, we could go
We
on and
could,
on and
yeah,
on and on.
definitely,
We could do
definitely,
this again. We could definitely do a part two to this at some point for sure.
for sure.
Indeed. Indeed, man, But as usual, thank you all for tuning in. This was episode 100 of the Cosmic Convos podcast, season 4 finale. I definitely want to thank all of you for checking in with us every week, and all the people all over the world that's listening to this podcast, as either on the streaming platforms or right here on YouTube and everything like that. Without y'all, tuning in, commenting, your suggest all that stuff like that. This isn't possible and stuff like that. And this is really and truly like the beginning for sure of whatnot, because some of the things that we talked about on this episode, I think some of that will start up be, I think we have a role in that. You understand what I'm saying? We have a role in that just because of our positioning. We have a role in kind of bridging that gap, and understanding how the common person can understand and appreciate and respect the astrological science or whatnot, and be able to get some utility out of it or whatnot. So definitely thank all of you all for helping us keep this thing going and whatnot. So, as usual, this episode is brought to you by Push It Forward Media Group, Caloprucia Astrology, and our good people over there on Patreon. Big up to y'all. Thank you all for tuning in. Rod, you got anything that you want to say to the people before we close this
You know,
season out?
no, I just want to say I appreciate those that are dedicated to really tuning in to getting as much in as they possibly can and learning uh, the power of this science and what it can bring and what it holds. I just know that this is a very different type of channel, a different type of podcast rather, because we try to touch upon things that a lot of other people just don't deal with, and there are a lot of great a lot of great podcasts, a lot of great channels, a lot of great people out there, and everyone has something to contribute. But Cosmic Combos is one of those that contributes something very special, not only from an African American perspective, from a perspective that he and I bring some very different um, experiences to this. We are both of a similar ilk as far as our spiritual perspectives and spiritual walks are concerned. But you're not going to find this anywhere else. You're not going to find this type of presentation that gets into some, and we can't get into the all of the things, the techniques. We try to give you as much as we can so that you can process it and do those things on a very general basis. The channel that I'm going to have coming up, and it's coming, right? I know it's long coming. I just have to have my perfectionist challenge, right, in life,
Hmm.
is to have things set up in a way and such that so that things begin to flow. And when I and do those videos, right, then we will touch upon some of the more minutia of the techniques and things like that. But this podcast is to give us a variety, to give us the ability to touch on various things, to go different rates and different routes and different ways to kind of pull us all together and really have just a good conversation around what astrology can do and what it can show us in the world that we live in. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that has been tuning in. Continue to tune in. It's going to be a great season 5. When we come back, we're going to have some things in next season that are going to touch on some techniques, of course, but also touch on and deal with some people we're going to bring in to really have some different conversations and to give us some contrast and maybe even some perspectives that are healthy and keeping an open mind. So,
Indeed.
definitely stay tuned, folks. We won't be gone for long, right? Uh, Winter solstice is coming up. He and I both practice that pretty adamantly. So we're going to take some spiritual time to tune into our own kind of walks of life and make sure things are right. But when we come back, and like it won't be too long, definitely you're going to have a whole another season to enjoy and to really spread the word. So go back and look at those old episodes, right? Go back and get into the ones that are there for you to review, to study, to listen to talk about amongst yourselves, and bring some of those questions and maybe um, bring some of those types of yearnings with you next season, so that we can maybe even have some people come on and have some fun as far as having some live action, right, that we can enjoy. So definitely have a
Absolutely.
good solstice, y'all. Definitely.
Indeed. 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 So that being said, thank you all for tuning in. We will be back real soon with season 5, another great season. Wrapping up this one. And, as always, be safe. And we're out. Peace.
Peace.